And now I am going to introduce our speaker today, Lorin Jackson. She uses she, they pronouns, and she is the Assistant Director of the Holman Biotech and an adjunct professor at Syracuse University. Lorin has dedicated her career to advancing community building within the library field, particularly for those not traditionally granted the same access to libraries. She has extensive experience over the past 15 years fostering anti-racism practices in various educational and nonprofit settings. She has authored several works focusing on the challenges and innovations in the field, particularly concerning critical librarianship, trauma-informed librarianship, equitable access and inclusivity, and developing kind leadership practices in libraries. Recognized for her leadership, Lorin has received awards, including the President's Award from the Medical Library Association in 2024 for her contributions to the Be Well initiative. And now I turn it over to Lorin.
Thank you so much, Christine, for that introduction. Thank you to also Jessica, who worked with me for this presentation today and for welcoming me back. Thank you to everyone who is here today and to the Greater South Central Regional Library Council for having me. Yeah, so that was a wonderful introduction. A couple of other things that I'll mention. I had some dental work done yesterday, so if I'm talking a little funny or if you notice that part of my face looks a little different, that's why. So that's the bad news. The good news, though, is that if you've heard of the Association of Health Science Libraries, they have a leadership fellows program, and I was admitted to that cohort, and that was announced today. They select 5 people to be involved in that for future librarians in academic health science libraries. And I got that news, and that was announced today. So a bit of bad, a bit of good, which is definitely a part of Soul Librarianship. So I just wanted to share that with you. Oh, thank you. That's so kind. I'm very excited about that opportunity and to represent Penn in those ways. All right, so we are now going to talk about how it's an art, not a science, and how to build a practice of soul librarianship. Here's our agenda for today. I'm welcoming you in now. Oh, thank you. Y'all are very kind. I'm welcoming you now. I am going to tell you again who I am and give some acknowledgments. Then I'll review some guidelines for respectful discussion, go over the learning outcomes for this session today. So what we're going to try to cover in 90 minutes together. Then I'm going to set the scene a little bit for slow librarianship and provide you with a mini lecture. So if you're not very familiar with what slow librarianship is, or you could use a refresher, I'm going to go through that for everyone so that you have some of the basics in place by the time you leave today. I'm also going to provide you some time to work on the personal plan for slow librarianship. We're going to work on a circles of influence exercise and have a little discussion about that. I want to end with some time for reflection for all of you in attendance today, and also leave time at the end for questions. One thing that I'll note is that for parts of today, including the personal plan and the circles of influence, you might want to have something to write with and a piece of paper or a notebook. So if you need to grab that, go off camera and go grab that while I'm talking, that's totally fine because that will become more helpful later in the session. So again, something to write with. One piece of paper should suffice, but a notebook or something like that would be helpful as well. I'm going to pause there. Any questions about the agenda for today? You can raise your hand or put in the chat. Okay, looks like we're good. But again, like Christine said, if anything comes up during the session or you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put that in the chat as we go. Oh, thank you. Okay, so again, I'm Lorin Jackson. I'm the Assistant Director at the Holman Biotech Commons, formerly called the Biomedical Library at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But I am originally from New York, born in Brooklyn, but raised in upstate New York near Binghamton. So very familiar with Ithaca and other parts of upstate New York. And I want to tell you a little bit about my other folks that I worked with, so my colleagues that helped with this entire presentation that I've curated for the session today. So Jill Deaver and Meredith Solomon worked with me to present this as a 4-hour continuing education course. that was endorsed, supported, solicited by the Medical Library Association for their 2025 conference that happened in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So we did this last year in May as a 4-hour class that I've changed, modified to present to you all today. That allows for various points of entry with what you know about soul librarianship or what you'd like to learn. That presentation was called It's an Art, Not a Science, Building a Practice of Soul Librarianship as a Health Sciences Librarian Leader. So that one was really focused more on being a health science library leader or inspiring one. And we were thrilled because the Medical Library Association, MLA, reached out to us from the Continuing Education Committee after a session that we did for MLA 2024 in Portland. That was an immersion session, which was 90 minutes, that Jill and I co-facilitated. That was more about kind librarianship practices. So that involved a bit of soul librarianship principles in action, but that was really more of a primer for folks that maybe weren't as familiar with it, and just kind of introducing it to that community. So we were thrilled when they came back to us and said, will you adapt that and expand and make it more specific for leaders as a form of professional development for health science libraries? And so that's what we did in 2025. I would say we had about 25 leaders in attendance, with myself, Jill, and Meredith presenting that this past May. So Jill Deaver is the department head and clinical in the clinical research and engagement department for Lister Library at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. She also is a new Osel Fellow. So I'm thrilled that we both got in this year. Yeah, kudos to her. Meredith Solomon is the manager outreach and public services at the Countway Library at Harvard. So we had different experiences that we were bringing to the 4-hour continuing education course that we did last year. And I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledge them for the work that they did that will contribute greatly to what you see today. Just gonna check the chat. Okay, all good. Saying hello, that's great. All right, guidelines for respectful discussion. This is based off of the GLSEN, which is the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network. They have wonderful materials available on their website if you need some. But it is a practice of soul librarianship to begin with some common agreements, some guidelines for discussion, some ways that we want to be sure that we're engaging with one another, even online. So whether you work on a hybrid team or in person or completely virtual, it is important to know that you can establish these as shared agreements with one another in a practice of building solidarity and making sure that you're starting with clarity and transparency of what you're aspiring to in the work that you do together. So these include no assumptions except for best intentions, correct gently, but do correct. So I know a lot of times in all different types of libraries, we can be conflict averse. We can not enjoy confronting people, right, or bringing things up to the forefront. We have a lot of introverts and also people that just don't like confrontation, which is completely fine. But it is important too to think about how you can gently correct someone, right? Call them in instead of calling out, which is a form of enacting soul librarianship principles. So we always want to think about the greater good. We want to think about involving everyone who's in the community, acknowledging that we are whole people that make mistakes, myself included, uh, to move forward together and to understand we're a team. Don't yuck my yum. So if someone else really has something that works for them and it doesn't work for you, you don't have to put them down. You can just acknowledge that, maybe they like something that you don't like, and vice versa. And that's completely okay because we're a community. You want to use I statements, avoid making generalizations, one mic, one voice. So let's not talk over each other. Make space, take space. So if you're someone who's more quiet, right, more reticent to participate in webinars or trainings, I'm gonna ask you to participate in the chat or like raise your hand and share what you're thinking about with the group. That would be wonderful. And if you're someone who normally does not have a problem talking a lot, maybe you're more extroverted, let's create some space for other people to be able to step up and share. But also that doesn't mean that you can't say anything. It just means that we want to be aware of the ways that we're engaging today. Respect confidentiality. Folks might bring stuff up that is particular for them or for their work environments. If you're going to share out after this, maybe ask that person to see if that's okay, or make sure that you're omitting anything that could tie back to that person, and speak in hypotheticals. If you're going to bring something from today into the future, into a future discussion. lean into discomfort and uphold your commitments, right? Christine talked about being present today, staying curious, staying, involved in what we're doing. And I really hope that we can all do that together. So those are the guidelines that I'd like to use for today. Oh, great. I see that Kelly is going to use Don't Yuck My Yum. Yeah, that's great. I think they use it a lot in different contexts for, some organizations, but also in schools. I find that Don't Yuck My Yum comes up a lot, like with students. So it's applicable in many different situations, but I found it useful to help people with not making judgments, rash judgments against other people. So in the chat, or you're welcome to use that React feature in Zoom and raise your hand. If there's anything else that you would like to change or contribute towards what we want to hold ourselves to today, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to let me know if there's something else that you would like to express. So you can put that in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. All right, so it looks like we're in agreement for these different guidelines, and I appreciate you, letting me know if anything changes or there's something else you'd like to bring up. You definitely have the capacity to do that at any time, and I'm happy to hear from you. You're participating here along with me, so if you have something else that you need to say, please let me know. All right, our learning outcomes for today's session. By the end, I want to be sure that you can define slow librarianship and identify its major benefits. I'd like for everyone to also begin steps to develop an individual slow librarianship plan. And if you looked at the documents that were sent out by Jessica yesterday, it's okay if you have not had the chance to look at them. But if you have, there is a plan, basically like a graphic organizer that's included in the documents that provides you with a structure, a template that can be used to create your own slow librarianship plan. And it kind of mimics a professional development plan. So if you're familiar with those, I'm sure everyone here is, and you've seen that before. We just adapted it, and I created a way to look at some goals and structuring ideas for how you might think about slow librarianship in real time, in a more accessible way to the work that you do. So that's what the slow librarianship plan is, and we'll get to that and give you some time to fill that out at the end of the session. And the last learning outcome is to reflect on your work in libraries and begin assessing how it could become more deeply rooted in slow librarianship principles, which, of course, after being able to define and identify and beginning those steps, we're hoping that reflection will come in at the end. All right, so now we're ready to move into setting the stage for slow librarianship and explaining what it is. So first, what I'd like to do is hear a little bit from you. Have you heard of slow librarianship before, and how would you describe it to someone who's never heard of it before? I would love to get a couple people to raise their hands and to share out to the full group just what your understanding is, or yeah, you can also use the chat as needed. All right, so far in the chat, I'm hearing not heard of it. This is the first I heard of it. You are not alone. New to me, totally new. Oh wow, okay. Has anyone heard of it before that's willing to raise their hand and say what they think it is? Oh, okay, Kelly, can we hear from you? Would you mind unmuting and telling us what you know or what you kind of think it is?
Can y'all hear me?
We can. Sounds
Okay,
good.
so I never do this, but I'm actually out at my reference desk because I'm trying to give my part-time librarian a chance to go to a library social. And I wasn't feeling social, I needed a minute. So here I am. Okay, so slow librarianship is kind of like resisting the partially like capitalism tells us we have to run and like accomplish and like slow
Hmm.
librarianship I think is about like slowing down, thinking about why we're here, why we're doing what we're here to do, and how can we be more intentional about like pressing into the things that like we're meant to be doing and not just taking on more to make it look like we're more useful. Like that's kind of the way I interpret it at this point.
That was excellent. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much for volunteering, for speaking first, for having your coworker go to the fair. I think that's wonderful. And yes, you touched on many of the crucial points about what slow librarianship is as kind of an answer to like a culture of rushing towards like capitalism, focusing on like more is better, innovation is better without thinking about the whole person. and really the goal of what a lot of us want to do with why we started working in libraries in the first place. Great, and I see Nicole's hand, and then I'll talk about what's in the chat. Nicole, you're free to unmute and share with us, please.
Thank you, Lauren. I totally agree with everything Kelly said. I would also add it's a lot about relationship building. So I think you've seen me excitedly greeting old friends in the chat all day. So I think that's an important aspect of slow librarianship. And I know for me, I also focus on identifying ways that I can uplift marginalized voices as part of slow librarianship. My understanding is that's part of it.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Nicole. So you talked about relationship building and lifting up marginalized voices, amplifying their experience. Yes, that is absolutely a part of the framework of slow librarianship, understanding it more, understanding what you can do in terms of micro actions that can impact the greater good, right? And thinking about how it's important to start locally. You can start just with acknowledging more people in your department, saying hello to old colleagues like you've modeled for us, which is great, or people that you've worked with before or that you've worked on teams with. All of those relationships are part and parcel of slow librarianship, which is wonderful. So thank you for that too. Thank you, Nicole and Kelly. So some other things that I'm seeing in the chat that I'll just name for us and narrate. One is from Carrie, which is great, and she got some hearts there. Like the slow food movement, taking your time leads to a more enriching experience. Love that. Yes, absolutely. The slow food movement and a lot of other slow movements, and I'll talk about another example in the next slide, are very much about that, really taking in the whole experience, not trying to rush the process, but understanding like how the food is grown, right? In the example of the slow food movement, the fact that somebody took the time to do that, acknowledging that it didn't just show up, right? It wasn't just fast food where you don't think about it, you're in the drive-through, you're going through it. I recently, this is an aside, but I recently listened to a podcast from On Purpose with Jay Shetty, and he was talking to someone, I forget the doctor's name, but if you look it up, it was like a recent episode that was about how like we sometimes misuse calorie counting, and he talked about that, like slowing down and like understanding how the convenience of fast food made us kind of compromise maybe some of our other values or what we would like to see in terms of the whole experience that we have like with food and how we take in that food and how we think about ourselves with what we're eating, like our self-identity when it comes to eating more slowly and like enjoying the experience, like when you cooked it and like, you bought it and you invested in it and you took your time. So anyway, yes, that is online with slow food, like Carrie has brought up for us. We have some folks that have read some articles on it. Yeah, fast is slow, slow is fast. I really like that. Yep, so it's being able to know that if you invest in it now and you set the framework for being more intentional, being more thoughtful about your relationships, being more aware of the different dynamics in place when it comes to power differentials, when it comes to the pressures in the workplace, right? In terms of burnout and quiet quitting, right? Things that have grown in momentum over the past years. We could also think about the pandemic or the epidemic of loneliness. That is a real, health issue right now for many adults, but maybe kids too. That thinking about how we are investing in those relationships and in what we would like for our experiences with one another to be, particularly in the third place of libraries, is a part of slow librarianship, like Lisa's saying. Yes, Tanisa also said likes the idea of not being in such a rush to innovate, more thoughtful work, slow and smooth. Nice. Yeah, things are kind of moving at a different clip. Now, we are going to talk about some of the complications with this, right? Like in the different dynamics where you might find yourself, or different types of libraries, or even, even beyond libraries, different information environments, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums all have very similar access points that might need to be rushed, might be driven by metrics and assessment and data for funding, which are real threats, which hopefully we can start to reframe and think about, even though that's not what the system is predicated on, to have different pathways and different ways to engage with one another where we're not burning out, where we're not just trying to reach the next level or achieve a certain objective, but thinking about that there are whole people doing whole work in libraries in particular. Jessica says it's unsustainable to always do more in free stats. Exactly. Yes, I completely agree. Okay, wonderful. So thank you so much for your input on that. I definitely wanted to hear from you where you are with understanding these different concepts before I got into the mini lecture. So yes, so librarianship is a philosophy and practice that values intentionality, care, and reflection in library work. So it's human centered. And we heard this earlier, right? It focuses on relationships, empathy, and community needs. So instead of a top down, organization or orientation to what libraries are and how they function, it thinks about where the library is located. It thinks about the people that use the library, not just as like abstract users, right? Or like user profiles. Even the word user can be like a little disconnected, right? Or patron. But thinking about the people that are involved and the relationships that are needed in order for the library to be sustainable, in order for it to function. So I think this includes, your environmental services, your facilities folks, thinking about the folks that help you with the business management of the library, right, all the way through everyone, including all of the different staff that work there. And if you have friends in the library, right, it's very just focused on the community. It's ethical and just. So, as was also mentioned by Nicole, it aligns with anti-racism, equity, and social justice. And I know we have our work cut out for us there. I know that I might be using some language that's a little controversial right now, hot take. But, you know, I think for all intents and purposes, regardless of how we describe what the language is and what we're trying to enact, the values of libraries are the same. We are very familiar with synonyms, right? We work in libraries. So there's different ways to refer to community and belonging, but essentially thinking about ethically what libraries provide, right? The space that they provide to different people, access to information that they need to live, hopefully more just and healthy lives is something that we're engaged in. And libraries often are the site of safety in communities that are experiencing environmental issues, right? When there are crises, uh, regardless of what they're about, people use them to supplement their education or when they are new arrivals to the country. So all of that is very much involved with what we're doing. And I think that it is helpful to reorient ourselves to our values as needed when we do the work in libraries. That connects with the next core principle, which is mindful practice. So encourages thoughtful decision making over rush productivity, which we did talk about a little bit already. When there's a decision to be made in terms of the way the library is going to function, in terms of the communities that it's going to impact, so librarianship really proffers that we're checking in about how things are happening. Is everybody on board, right? One tool that you can use for that is, and I'll do this sometimes in team meetings, after you've had a discussion, right, you've deliberated something, maybe you were coming to consensus, or maybe you were just giving an update as a member of the team, you can ask them to give you like a thumbs up, a thumbs to the middle, or thumbs down, depending on how they're feeling about what just happened. And you can use that as a way to temperature check, which is also a form of mindful practice, right? So you can kind of see like at the end, okay, like most of the colleagues are on board, we're okay. If you get a lot of thumbs down, that'll be something that you need to respond to and come back to the team about with saying like, hey, I noticed not everybody was on board. Here's what I think we're going to do. Or it's good for me to know where folks are right now with what we just discussed. It's also, so librarianship also has a core principle of sustainable work, so it supports staff well-being and long-term engagement. Like we talked about, slow librarianship is inspired by the slow movement, slow food, which I referenced a bit, slow education, same thing, taking time through projects, figuring things out. And that can be really kindergarten through graduate school, right? Giving people the opportunity to do a deep dive and going for depth rather than breadth with what is covered in the curriculum. So, what slow librarianship pushes back against are what has been described and what is described in much of the literature, neoliberal pressures. So, it rejects market driven values, like with words, efficiency, metrics, constant innovation, some of which I mentioned earlier. And it also really pushes back against like just in general speed. So it challenges the idea that faster is always better, even quantitative outcomes and being primarily data driven or assessment focused, by just focusing on what you can quantify, count, reproduce, measure against, is against slow librarianship practices. And I think that, when it came to the Medical Library Association, with other groups that I've worked with in terms of talking about this, I talk about why that's important to me. For many of the values that are shown here that are part of slow librarianship really resonate because I think that this is the way that I consider my proximity, my role to the library, right? Um, I expect that it will be a place that is centered on the experience of the people within it, that it's located in a community, that it really supports reflection, and that the people that I'm working with aren't just thinking about their individual goals and priorities, but about how the library is serving the greater good. I'm sure that you've heard in many different contexts that people refer to the library as the heart of a community or the heart of a campus, right? And I think it's great that we have a circulation system. But I also think that, it's important to know that so many people rely on what the library provides for different reasons that are shown here. And all of those connect with slow librarianship and practice. All right, so more setting the scene here. So examples in action, to give you some examples, like how does this work? Where does where do the wheels meet the road, right? So some examples are unhurried reference interviews. So that could be when somebody has a question, not just trying to tally it, right, and mark it off as the person that's engaging with them, but instead really trying to have the time to take a deep dive, learn more about the person that's asking the question. Also community-led programming and inclusive cataloging. So thinking about how to involve the community, thinking about what opportunities there are to challenge, or think about the way that the catalog is organized and what classification systems are used. I think that an example of this that maybe you've heard about are like Wikipedia edit-a-thons. So I know that in the past, the network of the National Library of Medicine has done that, where people will take a page, right, and work on it together and try to do a deep dive in the moment to make it more accurate with health information. That's just one example. And then reflective collection development and policy making. This I think can be seen a lot in terms of libraries moving towards different structures where there are no fines and fees, thinking about other systems where the people that are in the library are trusted with suggesting possible titles, changes to the collection development policy. Hey, we have new immigrants and folks that live here that are from this part of the world. Can we think about including more with more material that speaks to their experience? What would that look like? Do we have budgeting opportunities for that? Can we have representatives from that community to support us, so it's not always people that are from outside of that community making those decisions, but instead having it be informed by the community that's there? Those are all examples in action of slow librarianship. Also, we should talk about why this matters. So it builds trust and resilience in communities. They feel like they're a part of the decision making. They feel like they're a part of the library. It creates space for meaningful change and more inclusive practices. So it's really a domino effect, I think. The consequences of beginning and enacting these principles together show you what's possible, right? Like when you start with a slow librarianship framework or try to bring in some of these strategies and tools, it creates more of an opportunity for that to flourish even further. And it helps librarians, particularly at this moment in time with what is happening in this country, also globally. It helps librarians and library workers in general reconnect with their values and purpose. So it's a chance to have an anchor point to remember why we do what we do. So I'm gonna pause there for a second and just see if there are any immediate reactions, if there are thoughts, questions that people would like to share before we kind of move into some reflection time with the slow librarianship plan. I'm gonna pause for questions, comments. Thanks, Sue. Sue says that she loves this. It seems rooted in humanity and care. I agree. I think that it is a very helpful way to look at the work that we do. Thank you for that. Oh, Sarah agrees. Great. I'm in a book club with the 12 Steps to a Community-Led Library. Ooh, nice. Is that that's a book, Sarah? How's it going so far? Would you mind telling us more about it? I'd love to hear from you. You may not be able to talk right now, and that's okay. But if you are, okay, Katie, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yay, my video popped up. Just wanted to say that I am the assessment coordinator for the academic library where I work, and there's always very much talk of, continuous improvement. But that has me thinking at some point that really does become unsustainable. There's a point at which everybody is doing all they can. And there is also a point at
Yeah.
which if you keep on changing things, you're going to drive people away.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
the powers that be that are really responsible for assessment on campus also try to phrase it as just, you're telling your story, you're telling people what you do. But there's always a segment in the report where where it says, how are you going to use this for continuous improvement?
Mm-hmm.
And especially in a time where so many libraries are facing so many issues with budget, it's like sometimes the achievement is you've managed to keep doing everything that you have been, despite all of this, or that you're making the best of a bad situation.
Well said. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's sustainable. It means that people rose to the occasion because they cared, right? Because they were
Yeah.
invested.
And you probably need to think of some ways to help them take it back to 70 or 80%
Right.
because nobody could stay at 100% forever.
That's right. And I think that's really difficult in, a profit-driven state, or I guess like in terms of what you have to deal with the way that the library operates. So those are such great points, Katie, and you were getting lots of praise from your fellow participants that you were making a lot of great points. So thank you so much for sharing. I think that those are very real concerns, and that at best, what we can start to do is introduce micro practices, right? Or smaller sorts of interventions, let's say, that can, like you said, start to scale back maybe the amount that people are responsible for. And a lot of this too, like, right, like going back to the guidelines for respectful discussion that I brought up in the beginning, a lot of it is a discussion. It is talking to the people that are higher up and getting them to listen, right? And to play ball, honestly, to hear like, okay, here's what we did, like you were saying, and during the pandemic, as Sue has said in the chat too, where we still were able to meet the outcomes and the metrics that y'all want, or even in many cases exceed expectations, right, for the goals that we had set for our team or for what we thought our output would be. Now that we're at this point, you know, either for the leaders that are in these organizations as advocates, or I think it is very effective when people lead from where they are, right? Like if they hear this directly from the staff that's doing the work, I think that's really powerful to say, I'm not sure that this is sustainable. I don't think that I'm doing my best work. Can we have a conversation about what could be possible or where we could go within reason so that we don't continue operating at this level because we care about these people, right? Because we care about what we are putting forth in terms of what is possible. If I look at all of the risk assessment, right, or if I bring this out, I don't think that we have enough in place to be able to sustain the rate at which we've grown or the rate at which we're producing at this point. All points made by Katie for sure. Yes, as Sue said, the pandemic has shown us to take better care during a very tumultuous time. Absolutely. Renee asked, will you be talking about how to do some of this when non-library administrators frequently want stats and justification? We'll talk a little bit about it because I think that, in that case, Renee, which is a great question, we have to focus on our locus of control. There are some people whose minds we cannot change, but we can show them that that there are other ways to show value and to suggest that there are mechanisms that will be just as important as others, right? But I think that really focusing on what is within our locus of control for how we want to move in these ways is really important. Now, I'll say to Renee's question too, it does not mean that this is going to be easy. I do on the next slide, like when we get into you having some time to work on your plan, I do think it's important to focus on the wins and to think about the successes and where there's abundance. But that does not mean that it won't be wrought with many of the points that so many of you are making in terms of what makes this difficult. Okay, thank you, Sarah, for that idea. Cool. So I think that it is helpful if more and more people, I definitely want to look up this book too by Barbara. Okay, great. Thank you for those points. It really helps to hear from you how this is going. All right, so in the documents that were sent to you, you will see a slow librarianship plan. What I would like for folks to do is, I mean, you can do it on your computer if you like. I do think it might be easier if you write it, is to just look at the first page and the second to begin to write glimmers. So ways where maybe you've seen or think that you experienced something that could be under the umbrella of slow librarianship and put that down on the page. And then also to describe how slow librarianship could ideally be implemented in the place where you are. So wherever you work, wherever you study, if you could describe that, I would like you to do that there. If you have time, you can go on to the second page too, which goes more into like goals and some ideas there. But for right now, I'm just going to give you 10 minutes just to start this, start brainstorming. What are some glimmers? What are some moments of hope that you've had for maybe seeing slow librarianship out in the world, at your work, or in something you've experienced, maybe a conference, something like that. And then also, how would it ideally be implemented? Like, what could it look like? So I just want you to kind of go on that thought experiment and try it out. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do that. Thank you, Jessica. So the link to the book is in the chat now. But yeah, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. You can turn off your video if you like, just to work on your slow librarianship plan. And then we'll check back in after that. Okay, 10 minutes. Okay, great. So you had about 10 minutes to work on your plan. A couple of notes that I wanted to say to you all about how this is part of a practice of building slow librarianship is to build in work time to meetings for activities and for reflection time, and also not fearing silence. So those are two things that are definitely a part of that. Now, thanks to Christine, I'm going to give you a chance to talk in breakout groups. So you'll have 10 minutes in small groups to talk about what stood out to you. And yeah, I'll bring you back in 10 minutes. I was just saying, welcome back to the main room. Some of you were in the parlor, some in the porch, or on the porch. Maybe some people were in the garage. Welcome back to the main room. Okay, so I think that what we're going to do next, because we have about 27 minutes left, is that I want to give you time to look at the circles of influence exercise. But I'm hopeful that that was a moment to check in with your colleagues, with your peers, and hear from them about glimmers and opportunities and ways that they might start to enact this, because that's what's going to be most important, right? That you take away things that you feel like are actionable and possible and reasonable and within your locus of control. So we don't want to build something that seems unsustainable, that seems like it's too lofty, which is usually a lot of the criticism, honestly, against slow librarianship and why people kind of turn away from it or might be more hesitant to use it, is that they feel like it's not applicable to them. It doesn't have the utility that I hope that it does for all of us. So the fact that you could already start to sort of have those discussions, which you can see takes time, right? You need 10 minutes to do the exercise. You need 10 minutes to talk, not just 5 minutes, not a few minutes, but really giving it the time and space that it needs. So I'm going to leave that part with you. I hope that you take that plan with you. You can take it back. You can use it with your colleagues. You can use it in small group meetings with your user communities, however you like. That is open to you. It is open access, right? But what I'm going to do now is share the next activity, which are circles of influence, and give you some time to think about this as well. So I'm going to reshare my slide here. And here's what this looks like. So in the Google folder that Jessica shared with you as well, there is a list of values. some of these you might know off the top of your head, and maybe you need, some support with figuring that out. That's absolutely reasonable. You have that document to reference if you need. But now what I'm going to ask you to do just for the next maybe 7 minutes or so, maybe a little bit less, maybe 5 minutes, 5 to 7, is to figure out what are your core values or your core priorities, starting at the innermost circle. And then the next level out, let's talk about what it is for your department or division, however you would describe that, that is the immediate team you're a part of for where you work. Larger out from that, the institution or the organization that you're a part of, and then the broader community. And I'm leaving some of these somewhat vague on purpose because I want to see how you define them, right? And how these circles might play a role in your life and in your work life. But what I would like you to do is try to come up with at least one or two for each one of these circles, for what they are for you, what they are for your next level out, like your team. You could think of that for the department or division, the institution, which is the organization, or maybe like the broader library, and then the broader community, however you define that. Okay. So, oh, great. So a copy of the values list is in the chat. Thanks to Jessica. I'm just going to give you, yeah, about 5 minutes. 5 minutes to just kind of think about this. Think about like one or two things that would go in each circle. Okay. Thanks. All right. So let's pause there for a moment. First, I just want to share an example, and then I'm going to open it up to comments, questions, ideas. So on the innermost circle for myself, right, if I'm using myself as an example, two of my core values, number one is respect, right? So I need for people to feel respected. I need to feel respected. If I do not feel that way, I shut down. Like I will actually like become very stoic in a meeting, very removed. I know that about myself. And another core value is awe. So I actually get really inspired by seeing things that are inspirational that, create a sense of awe and wonderment, like at what we're doing. So those are two core values that I have. Now, for my next circle out, my team really values being of service, and they really value feeling like experts. So that's something that I know about my team based off of conversations that I've had with them about core value exercises. My institution, I know that one of the things they care about a lot is innovation, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. So that's one value I know is there, as well as like intellectual exploration, let's say, is also very important for my institution. Now, for me, the broader community, and this can be what it means to you, but for me, I think about Philadelphia, where we're located for the institution that I serve at. And one of their values is absolutely being acknowledged and not being forgotten. So when there are colleges, right, new initiatives that take place uh, in the community, when people are displaced, when there are experiences with people experiencing homelessness or schools being underfunded, they're like, don't forget us. Like there's this huge institution that's the University of Pennsylvania, but you are located in West Philadelphia, and that is absolutely true. So I know that that's one of their values. So I just wanted to give that as an example for me, and those are all real answers to each of those circles. So now I'd like to hear from you all, right, in the big group here in the main room, about why you think it might be important to reflect on these values and what we can do with this information. So why might it be important to reflect on these values and what can we do with the information? You can put that into the chat, or you are more than welcome to also raise your hand and share with the full group.
I actually found it just an interesting enough exercise to think about myself versus a department versus an institution versus a broader community. Like you said, Philadelphia, but I totally thought about in terms of, I mean, because I work at the Library Council, so I have a very limited set of colleagues here. I used SCRLC as my department because we're only a team of 6. And then so broader community ended up being like professional librarians. And so I would be really interested to hear if other people ended up referring to librarians and what values from this really long, varied list ended up going there.
Thank you, Claire. Absolutely. Yeah, that's fascinating. I think a lot of people do think about that, right? Like in terms of librarians or professional associations. Some people have said that for the broader community. And I think that's important to reflect on. Like, does that feel like that's a community that you identify with? that you're a part of, maybe it does feel a little bit different, especially for folks like I know some folks here work with broader regional, just like the SCRLCE, sorts of libraries or entities that are maybe a little bit more amorphous, right? Like they kind of depend on who's in the room and how that gets translated to this activity. And it is helpful to think about, like you said, comparing these different things, like what might they think? I can even think about the American Library Association, right? What are some of their values? Is that the same as the institution? Is the institution a part of that? Do they, also prescribe to those values? Do they think of them differently? And sort of where you fit in that. So I think that's really helpful, Claire, because it really is a map. And I don't think that we always reflect on what those different values could be. Other thoughts? And then I'll talk about what's in the chat too. Great. Mary Carol, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just struggling a bit with technology this afternoon.
Oh, you're fine.
But yeah, I was kind of on the same page with Claire, and we are 6 people, and so we all have very unique, although some things overlap. And so for the institution, I was thinking at least of ourselves and our advisory committees and our board and stuff. And then for the broader community, I was thinking of the 14 counties and our membership that are among the 14 counties. And it's all so diverse. And then I kind of got lost.
Like that might be harder to define at that level, is what I hear you saying, like with the broader community.
Yeah, because the communities are unique. Of course, there are commonalities. That's what makes us us, I guess, our commonalities and the ways that we're different and the cool stuff we all bring.
Absolutely. Yeah, that diversity is really important. And so is that range of experience, like Mary Carol is talking about. I do think sometimes it can be a worthwhile exercise to say, what would those values be, right? Is there an opportunity to talk about that together? Are there some things that we can anchor our practices in with one another so that we're all on the same page, kind of following the same momentum from earlier in the session with establishing community guidelines or guidelines for respectful discussion? It's in the same vein with slow librarianship to say, do we all care about the same things? Are we on the same page about these things that are going on, even at that very high level that Mary Carol was talking about? So in the chat, and thank you for that comment, that was really helpful. In the chat we have from Amanda, I think it's helpful to see the bigger picture and realize that having different values from your governing institution doesn't mean that yours are wrong. That's great. Yeah, even if it's not in total alignment with what they have, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that it speaks to you, right? And then you can know that you have your own inner compass, which goes back to our point earlier in Renee's question. What can we control? What can we not control? Well, we can't control maybe what the institution's values are. Maybe sometimes we get to speak to that, sometimes we get to speak to our team and what influence we might have, but sometimes we don't. And it's okay to hold those things particularly close and be like, well, I know that I value this, or I know that with my immediate team, these are the things that I need in order to be successful. Not to get into therapy, but my therapist says it's important to have non-negotiables, things that, I just will not waver on that are really important to me so that I can have that pathway forward regardless of what happens that's outside of my control or things that I can't control. Olivia tells us that your core values are the foundation of all your work. Right. So they give you a way to describe things. They give you also, almost like a decision tree when things are working in different directions. It's like, well, I really care about respect, so I'm not going to engage in gossip. I'm going to try my best not to do that because that's what I say is a core value. So it kind of reminds me of the Four Agreements. If y'all are familiar with that book, I need to reread it. But be impeccable with your word is one of the Four Agreements, and the idea is just that we are living through that lens and applying that to everything that we do, so that we're consistent. Elise tells us if you know where the conflicts are, you can anticipate them and work with them. That is awesome and definitely a part of slow librarianship. Anticipation and response, right? We can respond instead of react when we are aware of where the potential conflicts are, right? So if I know that respect is really important to me, but my institution really cares about innovation, okay, Can both of those things coexist? What might that look like? How can I be proactive in making sure and even articulating what that means to me? And do I understand what innovation means to them? Does that mean that that comes at the cost of some of our employees? Like, are they more, you know, are they more preoccupied with the bottom line and meeting those assessments? Like when we talked about what slow librarianship means, than the whole person? We might need to come to an agreement there. Or maybe I just need to focus on different things in order to be able to sustain myself within my work. Renee tells us the values are important to identify your why, which links to your motivation, commitment, and so much more. Absolutely. It gives you a map, it gives you a key for how to proceed, especially through challenging situations with what Renee is saying. Circe says, I was thinking about what values we want to represent the different circles versus what values others might want to use to describe those circles. Ooh, and how they may or may not be similar. Yeah, that's true. My boss may have a different idea about what my values are or for our team, and that can be based off of his motivations and my motivations. And so this gives you, I think, some language for being able to define those things. And just having this conversation, just thinking about circles of influence is a practice of soul librarianship. We're not just operating within the status quo and moving forward as if these things don't exist, right? Whether they are spoken or unspoken, they're operating in the cultures that we're a part of. So by being able to identify them, we have language, we have mechanisms that we can use to discuss them, right? To maybe problematize them, open them up, and give us a chance to make sure that we are in line with our principles and also seeing what's possible. Some things might not be possible, but a lot is possible when we have this language present. Suzanne says, provides a point of connection and path to understand your colleagues by learning more about what's important to them. Absolutely. I love that point because it's so much about communication, right? So I'm doing this with colleagues too. I want to know more about who they are, how they communicate, right? I'm sure you've heard of like the love languages in those different ways. Some people apply them to the workplace. Some people think that's not appropriate. But in general, understanding what people care about is an excellent way to connect with them. And we know that's the same for our user communities. Jessica says, I really value efficiency, and that got a bad rap today, so I'm taking that under advisement. No, that's okay. I care about efficiency too, Jessica, for sure. I think that thinking about how to do it intentionally, right, or working with other people to understand that maybe they're thinking about efficiency in a different way. I definitely have colleagues where they don't think it's efficient if I don't just take time to talk to them about what they think, right? So I might be wanting to move forward like you and say, okay, we did it, right? We got it done, on to the next thing. That is very much, I think, a part of like my type A personality from time to time. But I have members of my team who are like, yeah, but I needed to talk to you first. Like I wanted you to know my opinion. I understand that might not sway you, Lorin, but I did want you to hear me out, or I did want to tell you that I had thoughts about this before you put that on the agenda. And I say, okay, heard, let me take that time to talk to you about it. Renee said, I love the idea that it's a map. Excellent. Sue says, I'm part of a special district that is part of the local school district area. I work with schools, county folks in Onondaga, right? Yeah, Syracuse, seniors, youth, and local papers. Claire says, interesting exercise too, just to compare my personal values versus what I think my values for work need to be. Oh, okay. So some of them, similar to an earlier comment, are about like what's been, what might be defined for us. Okay, we got a lot out of that exercise. Thank you so much for doing it. Again, this is another tool that you can use as needed. We're going to move on to the next slide. So this was just a chance to reflect, but I think all of you just did that in the past couple times where I've had you share. We wanted you to be able to define soul librarianship and identify, what are the major benefits to it? Why does it make sense to use it? Take steps to begin to develop your individual soul librarianship plan and reflect on your work and how it can become more rooted in those principles. So now let's take the last few minutes for questions or reflections that folks would like to share. You can unmute and share, or you're welcome to put in the chat. But that's the end of the content for today's session. So yep, the last 6 minutes for questions or comments. Yeah, I'll just comment from the chat. Again, going back to Claire's, it can be a helpful exercise to think about what the values might need to be and what they are for you. That can really help in terms of having some clarity around what is happening or like was also mentioned earlier, for possible conflicts and understanding what happens, because that's definitely, I think, in line with why things sometimes go off the rails or why they might change, is because there is a conflict between values and value systems. Sue says that her values are adapt, cooperate, and impact. That's very powerful. Very good. Oh, good. I'm glad it was interesting and helpful. Oh, I'm glad it was helpful. Okay, there's a chat. There's a survey link in the chat for folks to take. Very interesting for what I started in my career as 100% accuracy versus learning the hard way. Yeah, sure. We learn through what we experience. And I think that that's also a part of slow librarianship. It takes time, it takes growth. And there are ways that you can speak to people about it. You might get, again, some hesitation, some folks saying that they don't think that this is applicable or something that they can really try. But I think that just even starting small, maybe instituting, I'll just throw out some examples, 10 minutes for someone, or 30 minutes in the workday to just say, hey, I just want you to reflect on the week. Just take some time to journal and tell me what that was like. Or you want to take a meditative walk with me. I love doing walking meetings for folks where that is comfortable for them, to be able to process how they're feeling, and what is going on. Taking that time, right? Getting to know people. And I would say that also for everyone here, knowing what you need and being okay with asking for that. Recently, I did a sheet, with some colleagues where I asked them some questions from the associate vice provost, where she likes to ask people, what energizes you, what drains you, and how can I support you? So I came up with a little template and I filled it out with my stuff. And then I asked one of my direct reports in his one-to-one, I was like, tell me, and I'm going to dictate it, or you're going to dictate to me, and I'm going to type it. And then I asked my boss for it, and another person in our department. And I said, I'm starting with y'all. Can you please fill this out? Because I want to learn to the test, which is what we talked about earlier. So it's like, I don't want to question how is most effective to connect with you and to understand what you need from me. Here's what I need. I need to be respected. I need to feel acknowledged. I like when people say that they can tell me what they want to talk to me about, not just, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? So I'm like, hey, that's all you need. You do that with me, you'll be successful, right? And I want to know that from my boss too. It doesn't hurt. Okay, wonderful. I see comments in the chat. I think we're kind of running out of time. Oh, a user guide. That's such a great idea, Amanda. I love that. I wish everybody used my user guide, even people on public transit, you know. Tanisa, thank you. Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. Please do take the tools. Please use the Google folder, as much as needed, and feel free to reach out to me, which is a good plug for the next slide. There's my information. It's Lorin J, LORINJ at upenn.edu. Please reach out anytime. I'm sure that I'm gonna keep, trying to shoot this from the mountaintop, shout it from the mountaintops, and share with people that I think soul librarianship is a great way to go, a great strategy, a great way to bring us into the library, bring us back to our values. And again, don't hesitate to reach out. And I really appreciate Christine, Jessica, and all of you being here today for our session. And I think that's all I got for you today.
Thanks so much, Lorin.
For sure.
Thanks, Lauren. This was great.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Bye bye now.